Hello, everyone. I think we'll get started now. So today we'll be sharing, administering, and automating on-premise infrastructure as a service scenarios using the Windows Azure Pack. My name is Mark Ameno. I'm a program manager in Cloud and Data Center Management as part of the Windows Server and System Center organization at Microsoft. I'll be joined today by Eamon O'Reilly here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through the inconsistent side of the Windows Azure Pack. We're talking mostly about the admin side. We're going to share some technical details about how the back end works and talk about how to set things up and how you can administer services and especially automate them. And Eamon will spend a lot of time showing you some of the really powerful capabilities that are new for the R2 wave. So you may have seen this slide already. So the Windows Azure Pack, for those of you that have not heard of it in detail, is a way that Microsoft is able to offer things that have been developed around Azure, services that have developed around the Azure pattern of offering services, and bringing that on premise to offer for enterprises and hosting service providers. Okay, and within that, there are a number of services that are available, such as websites, service bus, and virtual machines. And there's also a framework around the service management portal and API. Okay? So what's happening in this Azure Pack is that a lot of the technologies that we've been learned from developing and delivering services in Windows Azure, such as the Fabric, services that plug into a central service management API and a tenant self-service portal, a subscriber self-service portal. These things have been built up in Azure, and we've now taken the exact same code in a lot of cases and brought it on-premise, or we've built up a similar stack using System Center and Windows Server. Okay? So we enabled the Service Management API, which is, again, a way to plug in services, okay, in a central way and offer them to tenants, okay, and brought over the code that was running the self-service portal in Azure and brought that to run on Windows Server, right, using IaaS, right? And then some of the things that we're going to talk about today, we also had to add an administrative portal so that service admins could offer these services to their tenants. That was not required in Azure, actually, and a lot of the administration is done via command line or one-off tools, but we wanted to provide an offering that you could use to offer services to your tenants, to your customers. And as I mentioned before, some of the services have been brought over, like websites, virtual machines, and a service bus. Okay? So this is kind of the picture and what we're trying to achieve with this Windows Azure Pack. So what I want to do, even though this is a session about administration and automating the services, I wanted to quickly show the tenant experience for those of you who have not seen it before, so you can get a flavor for what we're trying to enable in the back end. Okay, so this is the tenant portal. How many of you have already seen this before? Running in the Windows Azure Pack? Okay, so like half. So I'll quickly go through that. In the keynote demo, we showed this for a new kind of offering called the virtual machine role. But in this case, I want to just show you how to deploy a VM using the standard VM template that has existed in Virtual Machine Manager, and System Center for quite a long time. So I'm going to go down to the bottom left and click New, Standalone Virtual Machine from Gallery, and I'll pick this Windows Server 2012 template, and I pick a subscription to offer it from. deploy it to, give it a name. I have to supply the administrator password. I don't need the product key, it's optional. And then I pick a network, and then I click go, and then it will begin to provision a virtual machine. So it's very simple. It's like what you would expect from a tenant self-service portal, right? And the idea is that there's not a lot of thinking involved. Now these are backed by APIs, so a tenant could, instead of calling or using the portal, they could call a tenant-facing API, a public API actually. So if like in DevOps scenarios, they could have their code call the REST API, or they could even have PowerShell commandlets that we'll be enabling later this year. Okay, so in general, it's pretty straightforward, and the tenant can go in. I guess I could show that they can go in and manage their VM like you would for any other self-service portal that's managing virtual machines. Okay, so what we're talking about doing in this session is enabling this for tenants, and there's a lot of things you can do behind the scenes to make this a good service. Okay, so that's the quick demo. That should give you an idea of, again, what the tenant experience will be. All right, so now let's talk about enabling service providers. This is someone like an IT organization or a service provider, a hosting service provider, a hoster, offering infrastructure as a service for their customers. Okay? While I'm doing that, I'm going to also talk about the general capabilities across all services, not just infrastructure as a service. Okay? So kind of at a high level, there's three sorts of things you can do. You can do administration of the services, okay, and offer services through a kind of common framework. You can do usage and support for billing, and then you can do automation. Okay, so these are three pieces. I will cover administration and usage and billing, and then Eamon will talk for a great length and share lots of details about our powerful automation capabilities. Okay, so let's go down and I'll start talking about deploying and administering the services. Okay, so here I think about three things. Offering the services. So how does that work, right? And how tenants come in and be able to consume those services, right? So that's being able to offer services via plans, and I'll share details about that in the next couple of slides, right? And then what kind of authorization do we support, right? And we'll go into that in a little bit later. Some of the normal role-based access control that that you would want in an enterprise scenario, especially, there's a little bit of that in this release where tenant subscriptions can be shared with other people or other groups. Okay, and this does offer the ability to offer services to a set of users over time. Okay, excuse me. Then under administer, right, you can offer and manage the tenant resources, so like virtual machines, networks, websites, things like that, right? You can monitor capacity and make sure that what you have is going to support the needs of the customer, right? And then again, as I mentioned before, there's usage metering, which has support for billing, right? Again, I'll go through details about that. Another important point that you would want to have as a provider is you want to be able to customize the experience for the tenants, right, to suit the needs of your organization. So you might want to change the way the portal looks by putting your brand on it, change the colors, change the theme, right? You can add additional services to the Windows Azure Pack framework, right, and offer some other unique services that your organization might want to do. And that will involve some coding maybe, right? You can even throw out the portal completely and replace that with your existing portal or a different portal that you would want to use instead, or integrate with other systems, okay? And finally, the code inside the portal is open. It's using HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript. So it's quite easy to take it apart and use it for your own needs. Okay, so now I want to talk about offering services to your tenants, okay? In the Windows Azure Pack, this is done through the plans. I have a diagram of how that works in the next slide, okay? So we'll go into a little bit about the mechanics of it, right? But think about this as a way to simply have a standardized offering that your tenants will sign up for. And each plan can offer a set of services across multiple providers. So you can combine websites and virtual machines, for example, right? And then you have quotas for each of those services, which limit the use of those services to certain limits that you establish as an administrator. Okay? There's a new concept which wasn't in the previous release that we had for this, where you can also provide an add-on to an existing plan so that existing subscriptions, can grow their services over time. So if you're in business as a hosting service provider, you might do an upsell to additional services. So like for a virtual machine, you might offer an unmanaged VM at a low price and then upsell something like a backup service for that VM, or a monitoring service, or a patching service. Okay, so those are the kinds of things you could do. Or you can expand the quota, right? So I sell you or provide for you your basic plan, and then you can have an add-on that expands your usage in quota from maybe being able to create 5 virtual machines, and now you can create 20 virtual machines or something like that. And you either pay me more or I charge you back more if you're an enterprise. And in this framework, then, it enables things like capacity management per subscription. You could, like I said, upsell opportunities, chargeback, showback. You can have different billing models around the subscription model. It could be pay-as-you-go, fixed price, either again for chargeback or for actual transactions if you're a hosting provider. Okay, so this framework enables that. So how does that work? So an administrator has these services, right? Or you as a provider have these services that are available, right? You can do virtual machines, website, service bus, and SQL out of the box. And then you can also define add-ons like increase my quota or attach the backup VM service to these sets of VMs for this subscription. Okay? And then you can pick different plans to offer. So you can have a plan that just has the virtual machines service. You can have another plan that combines multiple services like virtual machines, websites, and service bus. And you can have different services for a different plan. Okay, so like just websites with SQL databases that are backing them up. Okay, and then you have these different users. So you have a user, say, account A, the user A subscribes to plan 1. So when they do that, they create a subscription, okay, with a unique identifier, right? So in this case, I labeled it A1, but in the background, it's going to be a GUID, okay? So the system records those subscriptions. Or you could have a different account that subscribes to more than one plan. Okay, so you as a user can subscribe to 1 and 2, so be subscribed to 1 and 2. Right? And in the tenant UI, you see the result of both of those subscriptions. Okay, so you would add the whatever, like if I created a VM from plan 1 and I created another one from subscription 2, then I will see all 3 VMs. Or all the VMs in the same view in the portal. Okay? And I show another example where they subscribe to different plans, right, for account C. And again, you can have these add-ons. So if you have one of these add-ons, you can take one of these add-ons, either you provide it to them or they sign up for themselves, and they do it per subscription. So you can have one of these add-ons be here, another one on that subscription, but not both of them, something like that. Okay, so this should give you a pretty good conceptual picture of how plans and add-ons work. Okay? So now I will go in later on in a demo and show you how to do that in the Service Administrator user interface. Before I do that, I want to cover some of the topics that are specifically around infrastructure as a service. Okay? So for an infrastructure as a service plan, right, for a virtual machines plan, you enable access to a single virtual machine manager cloud. So you pick a VMM server, and you pick a specific cloud, which is a resource pool of compute, storage, and network, and you have a tenant that subscribes to that some capacity from that cloud. Okay, and you do that within the plan UI, and I'll show that in a little bit later in a demo. And then there's a quota. So you have a certain amount of numbers of VMs, CPUs, memory, and storage that are enabled for each subscription, and that's matched by a backing virtual machine manager tenant admin user role. Okay, and you also get access to things like templates, networks, allowed actions, things like that. Okay. As an administrator of the service, you get to you have to register the connection to the back end using the Service Provider Foundation API. Okay, that uses basic authentication. So you have to add a local user into groups on the SPF server. There's a session on Friday that goes into how to do that in detail, so I'm not going to cover that here. There's support for up to 5 different VMM servers in the back end. Okay, so you could think of that as different VMM servers in different data centers, or the same data center, or primary and backup, or anything like that. So, but it's up to 5 VMM servers is what we're testing and supporting. And again, you can look at cloud capacity and manage VMs and networks for the tenants, and we'll show you in the UI. There's also the ability to call into automation so that you can call a service management automation runbook, which Eamon will go into great detail around, right, and have an action triggered on an API call. So, for example, someone could sign up for a subscription and call an onboarding the tenant runbook that goes and provisions stuff in other systems after they sign up for a subscription. Okay? Then there's the service admin IaaS gallery. Okay, so this is something that we described this morning in another session, so I don't want to go into detail about that. But this is an experience by which you offer virtual machine role templates to tenants. Okay, so now that I've kind of talked about the feature set, now I want to show you what that looks like in the UI. So let me flip over to the admin portal. Okay, so here's the service admin portal, and of course you can see that this looks a lot like Azure, right? So it's the same portal UX, it's the same portal framework, but now applied for administrators, not just for tenants. Okay? So here I have the Virtual Machine Clouds service, right? The Virtual Machine Clouds tab. And at the very first thing it does is ask me to register with the REST endpoint, the REST OData endpoint from Service Provider Foundation, right? And I've already configured that, right? And then what that does is that reads from VMM and provides a set of clouds from Virtual Machine Manager, okay? So here I see the bronze, silver, and gold clouds that are configured in Virtual Machine Manager. And I can even click into one of those, and I can see the usage of my tenants' VMs on that cloud. And I can see, by manual inspection, right, how much space is left on that cloud. So I could go and check that and see if there's enough space over time. I could do automation around that. I could do reporting around that going forward. But in the UI, you can see right away how much capacity is there. Okay. There's also the ability to see a tenant's virtual machines. Okay, and this covers both standalone virtual machines and roles. There's also tenant networks that can be discovered, right? So these are the tenant networks that are there. Now there's this automation feature, right? So what I can do, as I described before, is I can add, say, on subscription, which is the object, when it's created, call this runbook. And then what that'll do is, as a tenant subscribes, or you subscribe a tenant to a plan, it'll go off and trigger a runbook and pass information to that runbook about that subscription, and you can do things like automate and like maybe create a network in the VMM for that tenant to consume, or add that user to a billing database in some other system, things like that. Okay? And then I can hit the the checkbox, and it just creates that mapping between that object, action, and runbook. Okay, and as I mentioned before, I'd covered this virtual machine gallery already in the previous session today, so I refer you to that to go over that experience. So now that I've connected my endpoint, I can now offer those in a plan. So let me show you what that looks like. So I can go New, Plan, Create Plan, okay, and I'll call that Demo Plan. I can click Next. And here you see, as an administrator, as a service provider, I have the ability to offer different services. So in this case, I'll do the virtual machine cloud service only. I click Next, and that creates a plan. Okay, so I've now created the demo plan. If I click into there, it says, oh, I haven't configured it yet. So I have to go into that clouds. It says virtual machine clouds and configure it. So I need to pick a VMM server. I need to decide what cloud to offer. So I'll offer the gold cloud. Here I have the option to offer, say, 5 virtual machines as an initial quota, maybe with 15 cores and a certain number of RAM. Say this is 20 gigabytes of RAM. I also can pick some networks. Say I take the internal company network. Different sizes that I support, small, medium, and large. These are defined as Virtual Machine Manager hardware profiles. And maybe I'll take the template that I used earlier in the demo for the tenant side. And I hit Save. And now that's configured the plan, and now I can just simply sign up a user. Okay? So the user can sign up, and you can offer self-service signups, or you can go down to here, click New, click Create on user account. Any email address will do. And I can pick a plan, like the demo plan that I just did. And I can sign up that user for that plan. You could also do it from the tenant side. You could also do it through automation. You could also do it via API. Okay? So that's kind of the end-to-end picture of how I offer services and how I administer the infrastructure as a service offering. Okay? So now let's flip over. I wanted to cover a few details about identity and authentication. These are tenant-facing things, but as an administrator, as a provider, you need to know about this stuff. All right, so in the Azure pack, it's using claims-based identity and authentication, okay? Claims-based authentication, right? So I have a diagram in the next slide about how that works, so I'll just quickly describe this. It also supports federation with other providers, okay? And then the methods for authentication that are supported are Active Directory, federation through ADFS, and ASP.NET membership, which are logins and passwords, okay, in a local database, okay? So how does this work? The user logs into their account through the browser. That redirects to a secure token service, right? That passes down, and for a federation case, it would show a login page. They enter their credentials. The user's let through. A claim is given down to the user's browser, and then they can come into the portal. Okay, once that's done, then that grants access to the resources in the back end. Okay? It's a straightforward, normal pattern that many, many, many web applications use. Okay, so we're just going with that approach. Okay, but I want to cover that just because a lot of people have asked about that. Okay, so now I want to switch gears. So I covered administration, and now I want to cover the usage metering and reporting. Okay? So every subscription is metered, okay, including infrastructure as a service. Infrastructure as a service usage is using the normal system center channels. It uses Virtual Machine Manager, using the Ops Manager management pack, pumps data into the Ops Manager data warehouse, Okay? And then what happens is that the Service Provider Foundation has an endpoint for usage that can be called to grab the data from the Ops Manager data warehouse and transfer it into a central system that the Azure Pack runs, right? And I have, again, a diagram of that in the next slide, okay? And then from there, there's an API that a billing provider can use, and there's also a data warehouse where you can pump that data into a persistent store. And I'll show that a little bit later, okay? And these APIs at the Azure Pack level can be used to support billing by third-party systems. There is no billing shipped out of the box by Microsoft in the Azure Pack. Okay, so we have partners like Cloud Cruiser and some other partners that will get into supporting these kinds of things. As I mentioned, there's a data warehouse. This data warehouse is running the standard Microsoft BI stack. So that means the data is stored in OLAP in a format such that we can then produce OLAP cubes, right? And then you can do your normal, Excel, Power Pivot, or Performance Point using SharePoint ways of analyzing the data. Okay. There's also, for the service providers, there's server inventory reports, so to help them with block compliance. Okay. So the way that this works, I kind of put down in this slide here, right? So start on the left, and we'll go to the right. Right. So as I mentioned before, there's Virtual Machine Manager, right? And then there's Ops Manager, right? Ops Manager data warehouse is the place where the persistent data is stored that's coming from Virtual Machine Manager, right? Using the Virtual Machine Manager management pack. So that data goes into Ops Manager, and subscription usage information then flows through SPF, Service Provider Foundation, right? Then there's a usage collector that goes and hits that API to grab data and put it in a data cache at the Azure Pack level. So that green stuff in the middle there, that's the Azure Pack. Okay? And then that thing has a standardized API across all services. So websites has a similar pattern, and usage data about websites is stored in that central cache. Same for Service Bus, same for SQL database, same for all the other services. Okay? And then there's a endpoint that can be hit by a billing provider, okay, if they want to produce bills against that usage data, basically suck that data out and store it in their persistent data store, okay. That subscription data is also hit by an out-of-the-box data warehouse, okay. So it runs an ETL process, hits the endpoint, grabs the data on a regular schedule, ETLs that and sticks that in the data warehouse, okay. Actually, that arrow should be pointed at the big thing that says DW, not the analytics. There's also capacity information that's directly grabbed from Ops Manager, right, via a SSIS job, basically. It runs on a schedule and grabs Ops Manager data warehouse data and also puts that in that usage data warehouse. Okay, so both the data from the subscriptions and the Fabric capacity data then can be, analyzed, via the normal BI methods from Microsoft, right? So like Excel and Performance Point, and then you can do your reporting from there. All right? Now, what kind of data is supported is the standard set of stuff you'd expect from an infrastructure as a service, right? So that's how much memory is consumed, number of cores, IOPS for storage, network I/O. These are the kinds of things that are there. And also a very simple one on running uptime for a VM. Okay, and that data is chunked per hour, okay, and that's something that's supported. That's the interval that's supported by Operations Manager. Okay, so that's just the pipe in between Virtual Machine Manager and Ops Manager. Okay, so let me just show you quickly the kind of things that are available there. Another demo. Okay. So here is the usage report that's hitting the OLAP cube, okay? And I'm getting things, if you can't read that says, let me just zoom in a little bit. It says runtime total, for example, for a VM. But now that, because I have the Microsoft BI stack, right, I can do things like show me per subscription, per user role in VMM, right, how much is each of them have used, okay? Then I can do things like show me usage for each of those subscriptions by month. Okay, I'm going to slice these again that way. And then I can do, for each of those, how did each VM behave within each of those periods? Right, so how much was it run per period? Right, so that's a simple way that a business analyst or anybody that knows how to use Excel can go and build and farm the data that's coming through this data warehouse. Okay? Another capability that's pretty cool is because this is an OLAP cube, you can use Performance Point, which is a feature of SharePoint. Okay? So what I can do is something like VM runtime. Wait. VM runtime across subscriptions. That's what I meant to do. Okay, so I can click into that report. And then it shows me the same slice that I showed before, right? And I could do something like, I need to put the legend on the right, or it's hard to read. I can do show me per virtual machine, for example, what was shown per subscription. Okay, but you can do lots of slice and dice. You saw those reports there. There's so many of them. And that was just a subset of the analysis you can do just by using Performance Point, which is just out-of-the-box capability from the Microsoft BI stack. Okay? So hopefully you see that there's quite a bit of capability around the infrastructure as offering, both on the tenant side and on the admin side. But I want to turn it over to Eamon now, and he's going to present and talk about really the huge power that comes from automation.
Great, thanks, Mark.
There you go.
Perfect. Can everyone hear? Hi, everyone. Okay, so I'm going to talk about automation and what the work we've done in System Center 2012 R2 as part of Orchestrator to actually bring automation into the Azure pack along with System Center and Windows. And the whole goal of actually developing this feature is as you start to actually onboard a lot of these new capabilities we're delivering from Microsoft, we want to make sure as we deliver them into your organization, you're actually able to consume them without actually adding more staff and optimize them so that we actually deliver on this vision of a cloud OS and on-demand services. And the only way you can really do that is as those consumers of your services need them, they want to be able to go to those self-service portals. They just want to have the stuff happen automatically. And the way you do that is you really have to understand bringing all these resources into your organization and then understand how does it actually integrate with the rest of the management capabilities you have inside of there. Because everybody's got kind of a unique IT process that they follow. What we want to be able to do is allow you to integrate into those systems. And then once you've integrated into any system, not just the ones that we ship as part of Microsoft, you then have the ability to orchestrate all of those systems together. So that IT process automation that we talk about, that's basically your process inside your organization that we're going to enable you to actually develop and then deliver through automation and through the features we've developed in Orchestrator and the new capabilities we're delivering in R2. So that's kind of the goal. The goal is to enable you to bring all this new capability in, but then automate it so that you really get a cloud service and that you don't have to do a bunch of manual tasks. When the user wants something, it needs to happen straight away. So how many are familiar with Orchestrator as part of System Center? Many people used it? Just a handful. So we, as part of 2012 of System Center, we delivered on a component called System Center Orchestrator. And that allowed you to basically automate, integrate all the different systems you had in your environment so you could deliver on IT process automation. So once someone said, give me a VM, you could actually go integrate into all the systems required in order to give them that VM on demand, and you may want to decommission it. There was all kinds of rules you could build in to actually enable you to do enterprise IT process automation. And so that had a really good visual authoring capability to allow you to drag and drop and build up these processes. But as we worked with customers, we actually realized too that a lot of customers use PowerShell, and they use PowerShell workflow that came out with Windows 2012. And so we're adding in a new feature into Orchestrator that will launch as part of R2 that will enable you or people in your organization who are very familiar with PowerShell to actually leverage all of the capabilities we have in Orchestrator, but write in PowerShell and leverage PowerShell workflow. So that's really how you want to think about it. If you like the visual authoring experience, you can continue to use that, and we're investing there. If you're a PowerShell user and you like PowerShell workflow, this is a new feature we're adding in that I'm going to walk through today and demo. So hopefully you've seen some of the Orchestrator sessions. If you haven't, I would look those up. We have some references at the end to give you a feel on how the visual authoring in Orchestrator works. Okay, so this new feature that's part of Orchestrator we're calling Service Management Automation. And it comes down to three things. So the first thing is you're going to be able to do all your authoring of these runbooks inside of that admin portal that Mark's been showing as we went along. So you don't have to go to somewhere else, a different tool to author everything. You can actually author all these runbooks, integrate them all together, and deliver on that process automation without having to leave the service admin portal. The second thing we bring is all of the high availability that we had on Orchestrator. We also bring that on top of PowerShell workflow and enable you to actually write all of your scripts, all of your runbooks, and have them available in a highly available way. So it's backed by SQL Server that can be clustered. You can have multiple nodes that will actually pick up the work. So if one failed, they'll go and continue the work. So it allows you to centralize all of your processes into one place and make sure that they're always available. And then the third thing we do is because we leverage PowerShell modules, you can easily integrate into all kinds of systems you have in your environment. So as you know, Microsoft invests a huge amount into PowerShell to make sure all of our server products can be managed through PowerShell. But then there's a lot of partners out there and vendors that also have PowerShell modules. So now you're going to be able to take those PowerShell modules as well and actually manage their systems all through this one central place that we're calling Service Management Automation. Okay, I'm going to switch over and just give you a quick view inside the portal, and then I'm going to come back later and do a more detailed scenario. Okay, so here's the portal that Mark was working in earlier, and here's this new space called Automation. So I'm going to click on there. And inside of that space now, this is where we bring all of the capabilities to store all of your runbooks and then actually manage them from an operational standpoint so you know what's happening as they run and do all of the automation across your entire data center. So you can see when you first get in there, you're going to see a dashboard of everything that's happened with these runbooks. And you can basically filter out what you might want to. So you may want to not see the running. You can just take the running out, bring it back if you want to, or just on the failed. You can also change the views. So you can quickly kind of drill into what's happening in your environment to help figure out if you need to add more runbook workers or do additional tasks. And similarly, we bring all of the failed or suspended ones right up to the front to allow you to work on those. And you can kind of see what's in your environment as well. On the top level after that is just runbooks. So this is where all of your runbooks, that's just central library that you can just build and they'll always be available to you inside of the runbooks page. And I'm going to drill in a lot more into this as we go forward. And then the last thing we have are resources. So this one kind of gives a lot of the runbooks the value beyond what PowerShell workflow would give you. So in here you can create things like your credentials. So one of the hardest things when you're doing PowerShell is, okay, where do I get my credentials to connect to all these systems? We can securely store those credentials. If you want these runbooks to run on a schedule, you can create schedules inside of here. You can create global variables. So maybe you've got a server that is where you pick up certain bills or certain information. You can actually store that information in a variable and then have your runbooks reference that. And so if the variable ever changes and the server changes, you don't have to go back and try to figure out, modify your runbooks or modify PowerShell. You just change that setting, and then everything gets pulled in automatically into the runbooks. So here you have the ability to import the PowerShell modules, or you can just add those settings I talked about, like connections, credentials, variables, and the schedule. Okay, so that's just kind of an overview of how everything's laid out. I'll come back to this in a minute and do more detailed scenario. Okay, so what you saw there basically is our new offering called Service Management Automation, and you can see it's delivered inside of the portal. So everything you do from the authoring can all be done with inside of the portal and the management. And it's really about those three things I talked about. How do you integrate all of your systems? Then how do you orchestrate them so they can deliver the process, and then we deliver on the automation. But you get it inside, and you don't have to go to another space to actually work on it. All right, so I'm just going to walk a little bit about what are the features you get, so you get a good feel for what we're actually offering. So the first thing you have to do is actually get it installed. And so it's going to come as part of the orchestrator component inside of System Center R2. If you see in the left-hand corner, we have a thing called Service Management. Under there is automation. And there's three features you're going to lay down in order to have this work. So the first thing you'll do is you'll go and put down the web service. And so the web service is an OData REST web service. And so all of the connection into the service happens through that web service. So you'll lay that down first. The next thing you'll get is runbook workers. So just like we have these runbook servers and orchestrator, we have runbook workers to support SMA, very similar architecture. And what these do is these are the ones that are pulling the work. So you submit all these jobs to go do some process, like give me a VM, or add this person, or add this information to my CMDB. Whatever your process is, all of those get submitted into the database, and then these runbook workers, you can have one to many, will actually go and pick up that work, do everything, and persist the state back into the database, so you get all of the operational information that's happened on top of these runbooks. The third thing you'll want is that PowerShell module. So just like all of the systems we're working with have PowerShell modules that allow us to automate them, we also have a PowerShell module that you can install that allows you to automate all of the tasks you'd want to do on top of SMA. So for example, you may want to say, every night, back up all these runbooks and put them into another place. And so you can automate all those tasks through our PowerShell modules. And then the last thing you do after you've set everything up is you just go into the portal, just like you saw Mark register that endpoint for the VM clouds. You just go and register this web service endpoint inside the service admin portal, and then all of the automation lights up automatically that you'll see later on. So that's how you're going to get and lay down the service management automation with Orchestrator and System Center. Once you're in there, you basically want to start doing some work, and you want to start authoring and getting some value out of this feature you just installed. And so the way you do that is you get all of the PowerShell modules that you may want to work with. So what systems do you have in your environment that you need to talk to? Get those PowerShell modules and import them into our system. So now you've centralized all of the connections you can have into those systems. When you've done that, then you can actually go add all the resources you might need. So you may want to have some connections, you may want to have credentials, all these things that actually give additional value to your runbooks. You create them as you need to. And then you do the full authoring experience inside the portal. You don't have to. We offer a full authoring there, but if you wanted to author PowerShell workflow in the Windows ISE, the environment for authoring there, you can, and then import that runbook directly into SMA and start using it. So you can actually, all the investments you may already have in PowerShell and PowerShell workflow, you can just take and move directly in and run them. You don't have to make any changes. Once you've written these runbooks, you've got your tasks, your processes defined, we then allow you to do the testing of that directly in there. And then once you're happy that the runbook's good, you can publish that so that now it can be used officially, and you can track it, make sure it's running the way you want it to. So now you've actually got your runbooks, you've got your IT processes defined, and they're off and running. So a lot of times they just run. You don't even know what's happening. They're just reaching into other systems, figuring out what's going, and doing all the work that you once did manually. But you'll want to know that they're healthy. You'll want to know that actually the process you've defined is actually running the way you expected it to. And so all of that operational view is inside of the portal as well, so you can see what's happening. Obviously, we have management packs that work with Operations Manager, so you can pull in all of the information that's happening inside of SMA in there as well. But if you want to drill down, troubleshoot, figure out what's going on, you can actually do that inside the portal, fix it up, make some changes, and then publish it again, and keep the system healthy inside of the portal, but also leverage Operations Manager if you need to. So I showed you a little bit on the resources space. So this is where you actually go and import all of the additional things that add value to these runbooks. So you go there, you'll import your modules, You can add additional ones. So if you wrote your own modules, or you got one from a third-party vendor and they have a module for their system, just import that in. We'll keep it inside our system. And then you don't really have to worry about it. All of these runbook workers will actually automatically get these modules deployed. So these runbooks will work no matter where you run them inside of the SMA environment. And then we have scheduling. So if you want some task to happen maybe every midnight, you want to go do a set of things, maybe check if the system's healthy, do some additional work, you can write your processes as runbooks and then create a schedule so that'll happen at that time or on a recurring basis. So you can say every day do it. Or maybe you want to do it at 6 and then again at midnight. So this gives you the ability to do that with schedules. And then through all that administration, we actually leverage our PowerShell module, so you can add additional runbook workers, configure the website, do all of that through the PowerShell module you saw when we first installed. So that's basically how you're going to lay it all down. So now let me go into the demo and kind of walk you through a real-world scenario to give you a flavor of what the capabilities are and how we've brought it all together inside the portal. Okay, so I'm back in the automation. I'm going to go into the dashboard. And I'm going to go into our runbooks. So what I'm going to demo today is actually how, as an administrator, you could leverage the automation to actually ensure that your clouds are staying healthy. So you saw Mark had some clouds there in VMM that are being monitored by Operations Manager. So I'm going to show you an example of if something happened and you started to run out of memory or run out of some space on those clouds, how you could actually define what should happen when that occurs and actually automatically remediate that and bring those clouds back up healthy again. So I'm just going to type in SLA here because those are the runbooks I'm going to work on. And you can see I have a set of runbooks that actually go and do specific tasks. So the first one I have here, which is basically check for cloud memory alert. It actually talks into Operations Manager and System Center looking for a specific alert that it wants to act on. If it finds that alert, it's actually then going to go and remediate that cloud by adding a host to that environment. If it adds the host successfully, it's then going to go and install an Operations Manager agent on it, because you'll want that also to be managed and make sure it stays healthy. If anything happens, it'll open up a ticket on failure. And then the last runbook I have actually calls into Orchestrator. And actually, Orchestrator, so if you've got investments in Orchestrator, you can call it in directly from SMA and have it do specific tasks. In this example, I open up an item in SharePoint so that you could actually track the work and you can see that this was happening. Okay, so you can see here that I'm going to actually go in. There's a couple that are in edit. I'm going to finish those off and then run that and then walk you through what's going on. So the first one I'm going to do is monitor new hosts. So we drill into this. I'm going to go to Author, select Draft. And so inside of here, you can see this is where you can actually author directly inside of the portal. So you can see here I've hard-coded my name to my server. And then I'm pulling up a couple of credentials. So you can see I'm pulling the VMM credentials that I've stored as a resource, and same as the Operations Manager server. So this is, again, where I'm not hard-coding this information. And then I'm just doing 3 lines of code. So this is a PowerShell to install this agent. But what I'm going to do is fix this up because we don't really want any hard coding in here. So I'm going to comment that out, and then I'm going to add a parameter. And I'll call it the same as what it was before, so host name matches. And so now what I've done is I've now enabled this runbook to actually take parameters and go and perform work on them. And so I could go ahead and test this. And you can see it actually read all of the parameters required for this runbook, and I could go and test this specific runbook individually without having to test the entire process all at once. Okay, so that looks good. I'm going to publish this. So you can see now this is actually published. And you can see I've commented out and I'm taking the parameter. I could go and work on a draft one while this is being published, and all the current jobs will take the published one. Okay, if I go back, maybe there's one more that I had to work on. So again, I'm going to filter for the ones I care about. I can see the last one that's in edit, which is the remediate cloud. So I'm going to drill in there. and do a very similar work on that one. Okay, so here you can see I'm pulling in a bunch of variables as well automatically from the system. I'm connecting up to VMM. Then I'm going to add in that host automatically. And then I'm going to call it checkpoint workflow. And so this nice thing, if you're not familiar with PowerShell workflow, if something goes wrong, you can actually call a checkpoint. And so at that point then, it'll go into suspended state. And then say maybe the server you're trying to act on was down for a while. And so it couldn't do it. If the server comes back up and maybe you just restarted it, you can then resume the workflow inside the runbook, and it'll start from the checkpoint. So you don't have to write all the logic to figure out what happened beforehand and make sure you don't run the same thing twice. Okay, I open up a ticket down here, and I call Orchestrator at the end. But the one thing I'm missing here is adding the monitoring agent into on top of the host after I've actually added it to VMM. So inside of the authoring experience, I can just go Insert, and I can go Runbook. And all the runbooks in the system are now available to me. So I can go monitor new host. This is the one I just created. And you can see I can actually insert this directly inside of here. And the nice thing about that is it figures out all the parameters required for that and just tells me exactly what's needed. So I can go and modify this. So I know I just added that parameter for hostname. So what I can do now is type in the hostname. And so I believe it's called, extra host is the variable. There, I'll auto-complete that. Take away this thing. And so this one's complete. So now I can go ahead and publish this. So I can go back again, and I believe they're all ready to go, so I could actually go and start one. So I'll just filter them out again. Oh, let me refresh this. Okay, so I'm going to go and actually run this. So remember what's happening here. We're actually talking to like 3 or 4 different systems. So we have Operations Manager, which is monitoring all those clouds that Mark showed you in VMM. So what we're going to do is we're going to look into Operations Manager looking for an alert. If we see one in Operations Manager, we're then going to get a host and add that into VMM automatically. Then we're going to actually install that Operations Manager agent onto that host, so it's also monitored. If anything happens, we can open up a ticket in your service desk solution or something else. And then we're going to call into Orchestrator to talk to SharePoint so that you can keep track of the work that was done there, and maybe someone has to do additional work. So we're kind of integrating into all kinds of systems you might have in your data center. I'm just showing these ones, but you can just imagine all of you probably have different ones you have to integrate with, maybe custom ones. It doesn't really matter. You can integrate into them with this, stitch all of those together, just like a set of runbooks, and actually go and kick one off. So I'm going to kick it off here, and we'll see what happens. So I'm going to click off the watching Operations Manager. Okay, so that runbook is now being kicked off, and it's going to go and process. And this is a long-running task. You know, this could take a few minutes. You could have some in your environment that might take, minutes to hours to actually complete. But all of that won't matter. It'll just go ahead and do all the work. And if anything happened, you can actually go and troubleshoot and figure out what happened. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just show you actually what's going on with those systems so you get a feel for how it's integrated into everything. So if I look up into OM, so you can see if I go back to the cloud health here. So those are that bronze, silver, gold clouds that Mark showed you earlier. And so inside of Operations Manager, you can then actually go and see, if something's up. So here's one. You can see the host cluster is overcommitted. And so if you remember in my runbook, I was just looking for that tag. And if I see that alert, that's going to be the trigger that tells me I can go and do specific work when I see that alert. And if I go back to administration, you can see all the machines that are currently being managed inside of Operations Manager. And what I want to do is add another one there to actually give it additional capacity. So that's Operations Manager. And if I go back into VMM, you can see here's the clouds that are in Virtual Machine Manager. Here's all the host groups that are supporting them and all of the hypervisors that are supporting that. And I created one called SMA Hot Add. And this idea behind this is I can add a new host into here to support these clouds if they need it. So this is more of an on-demand based on the requirements that you have on specific clouds to make sure they stay healthy. And so this is where the host would show up. So let me go back into the portal again. And I want to drill into the orchestrator one just to give you a feel on how we call in into other systems as well, including our own. So I'm going to just drill in just like I would in all the rest. I'm going to edit this one. And the nice thing about this is this runbook's committed. And so this is going to get called because I kicked out that job. But it doesn't really matter. You can work on it here. And the other one is already there and available to get called. So it allows you to have this draft and published version as you see fit. And the nice thing about this is I just imported in the Orchestrator PowerShell module that we have for Orchestrator. And it automatically started to call into Orchestrator. So all it does is get the Orchestrator creds, which is the runbook I want to call inside of that Orchestrator, what's the URL, and then go and start it. And I just print out the job ID. And so we could enumerate on that and do a loop, figure out if you want to do more actions based on that. So let me just log into Orchestrator. So this is the graphical authoring. So I know only a few of you have seen Orchestrator and used the graphical authoring experience. So this is the other part of Orchestrator we offer that we shipped in 2012, and we've made incremental updates to as part of R2. I'm not going to go into a lot of depth here. There's lots of sessions that you can see, and there's a huge amount of capabilities that are in here. But the one thing I wanted to highlight was this new SharePoint integration pack. So as part of R2, we're actually going to ship another integration pack to support SharePoint. And this is supporting SharePoint both online and on-premise. And so the one I'm actually going to call, if you remember, was create list item to track, is actually going to go and create a tracking item on SharePoint Online for this IT process that I just kicked off and ran. So again, that's one more system we're integrating in. Okay, I'm going to go back again. And I'll see if the job might be done, or I can track what's happened with that. Okay, I'm going to go inside of here. Okay, you can see it ran and completed. Let me see if it was successful. So it looks like it did a bunch of work. So you can see what I did basically in all my runbooks is I kept printing stuff out to the screen so that you could easily troubleshoot it. So it's just the output stuff of PowerShell, and you can basically go down and figure out what was happening. If you wanted a more kind of fine-grained approach and not just dumping everything out, we actually track all of the activities as well, so you could go in and figure those out for yourself. So here's all the different output, but you could click on one and then view the details of that specifically. All right, so it looks like those are completed. Let me just jump and see if anything happened to those systems, see if they're up and working or not. So I think this was the one. Yep. So now you can see that new fabric just got automatically added. So while I was just talking, we've got a new hypervisor that's supporting the clouds. And if you go into back into Operations Manager, you can see that machine is also being managed by Operations Manager automatically. So now it's going to stay healthy, and if we got an alert, we could actually act on that one as well. And the last thing I'll do is I'll see if we've got into SharePoint. Just retry this. Yep, you can see we've also created that list item into SharePoint to actually track this work. So just while I was going through and talking to the demo, we've talked into all these systems. Your whole end-to-end IP process can be defined. But the nice thing about it wasn't one big process you had to define. You could just define the specific tasks as runbooks, make sure those are working, and then stitch them all together. And you can just imagine you could reuse these runbooks for all kinds of stuff. So adding an agent to a host works well in this scenario, but there's probably other scenarios where you want to add an agent to a host. And so you could just reuse that runbook for those scenarios as well. Okay, so we'll come back, and I think I'll go back and show a little bit more of some content, because I want to talk a bit about Orchestrator as well. Okay, so the SMA architecture. So if you're familiar with Orchestrator, It actually works really well, and it's very highly available. Most of our customers like the way it's working, so we wanted to have a similar architecture to support service management automation. And so you can see what we basically have is we have a database with SQL Server backed, which can be clustered for high availability. And then we have these 1 to N runbook workers. And so these runbook workers take all the work as it comes up. And the one difference we have between Orchestrator and SMA is we've made an improvement in SMA, whereas Orchestrator basically had a spillover effect. So you'd fill up one runbook server, and then after it got full, the next one would take up work. With SMA, we load balance all the work across the runbook workers, so they're all taking work at the same time. But if one of them failed, the other ones would just light up and take those jobs and complete them. So you never have to worry about the jobs not actually getting picked up and run. The system is going to take care of those for you. And then everything, as I mentioned, talks through this OData REST web service. And the really nice thing about that is Orchestrator has an OData REST web service on top of the UI, and then on top of this SMA, we also have that OData. So those two can talk very easily to each other. You saw me talk to them through PowerShell, but you could talk to them through OData or anything else you wanted to actually implement your own process. Okay, so I wanted to have a slide on some of the stuff we're doing for Orchestrator, the graphical authoring, beyond the work you just saw for SMA. So we have a bunch of integration packs that we ship in Orchestrator that were part of 2012 and 2012 SP1. And so we're bringing all of those forward and making sure they run really well with the rest of System Center and the rest of Windows Server R2. So everything you're used to is going to come forward. And then the new one I mentioned there and you saw a little bit about was the SharePoint IP. So this allows you to now actually go and integrate into SharePoint in your environment to complete your own processes. So there's a lot of investments, and we've done a lot of feedback from customers, smaller little DCRs fixes based on usage in 2012 and SP1 that you'll see as part of R2. So that covers what I want to talk about from an automation standpoint. I think hopefully you'll look at some of these other sessions because they go into depth into Orchestrator and they go into depth into other areas that Mark showed as well. But I think from the automation perspective, if you can kind of take away that with R2, we're not just giving you a bunch of stuff to add additional capabilities to offer to your end users. We're also giving you the automation capabilities. So no matter what you have in your environment, doesn't matter what systems you have, we're going to give you the ability to integrate into those systems and do complete end-to-end IT process automation, all based on PowerShell, which is already most of you guys are probably using it, and if not, it's very easy to pick up. It's really built for those IT administrators to actually go forward with. So I think with that, I think we can answer a few questions if you guys have them. I'll bring Mark back up, and he can talk some more about the areas he covered, and I can talk about automation if you have questions. So once again, thanks a lot, and please fill out the eval form. It really helps us to kind of tweak this, figure out what you guys want to see more of as we go forward. So again, thanks a lot.